Great. So, like we said, I don't know how much people have drilled down into it or dived into it today, talking about digital assistants with regard to e-business suites. But this is definitely an area where Oracle is investing very heavily in their next generation, both with their SaaS products, their software as a service products, as well with an entire platform allowing people with all different enterprise applications to be able to, modernize them as digital assistants. So today we're going to talk a little bit, not really 100% focused on EBS, but even more on the fact of, what is this buzzword, okay? Because what happens often in the Oracle world is that Oracle decides to sell something and then everybody gets very excited. But in the end, it's kind of a lot of work for not so much, for not so much ROI, as they say. So we want to really look at today, besides the hype of digital assistants, how could it really bring us value for our EBS applications? What does it entail? What does an EBS project look like? And try to really dive deep into, the world of a digital assistant and, what it would mean to you in the guise of your project. So a lot of times in the past, right, when we talked about a virtual assistant, a digital assistant, a personal assistant, we had one of these, in mind, right? I'm still waiting for the robot who's going to cook dinner for my 3 kids, especially in COVID, where I feel like I'm cooking all day. But, we had from the Jetsons, where they had the maid robots, to all of these type of, visualizations of what a digital assistant should be. But I think by now, right, from going all the way back to the 60s, we really understand that we're way past the hype. Okay, today there are already 7.5 billion connected devices. Okay, meaning your television could get information from the Weather Channel. The temperature in your home could be managed by a cellular phone, as can the alarm. People are able to lock and unlock their doors, lock and unlock their windows. Samsung even has a fridge where you could check. You could see the inside of your fridge. You could, project the inside of your fridge to your phone, etc. So the whole concept of connected devices has changed dramatically. And the minute you get into this area where, your devices could really see a glimpse into your human world, right? You're going to want to go the next step, which is what we say digital assistance and artificial intelligence, right? We're going to want, instead of them just looking into my fridge and taking a picture, we're going to want them to say, Mia, you need to buy milk, and add that to my to-do list in Slack or Trello, because they've seen the inside of my fridge and they see I don't have milk when I usually have milk, right? So now you're kind of in the second phase of this digital assistant where the devices themselves are connected, but they're not being driven, right? They're not being driven by a digital assistant. So essentially, today there's a lot of brands. I mean, every major brand today is rushing to get into the world of these assistants, right? Microsoft has Cortana, Alexa is Amazon, Siri is Apple, Google is for Google, right? Okay, Google. And, already, my husband, for instance, his entire life is run by Google, right? He gets woken up by an alarm. The alarm says, you have a meeting in 3 hours at the university, so you should leave in an hour and a half to avoid traffic. And that's kind of the concept of a digital assistant, right? It's basically a computer program that is able to link various modular pieces of code, right? It's able to link the traffic from Google Maps with the Google Calendar to see his calendar, with the alarm, etc., in order to predict, human behavior or assist in human behavior. So that's kind of the concept of the digital assistants. And now with the new normal, and all of the new challenges we're seeing with COVID, digital assistants are becoming more and more important when we have a higher reliance on technology on the one hand, but we have more lay people at home trying to use technology on their own, right? So people are not in the office anymore. There's a higher volume of questions with regard to HR, with regard to company questions, with regard to health questions, and they need more channels to be able to support all of these, customers, vendors, partners, whatever it may be in the field, who are no longer able to maybe reach a human agent on the one hand. And on the other hand, you need to be able to really scale this up to be able to, handle the influx of people asking questions. And they have to be able to use your system without training, right? You can't create a whole new mobile app where people need to understand, every button and what things work which way, right? So we've seen this a lot at our company, at Oracle. We had to build bots for New York City Transit because people were calling in sick to the general, what they call it, the crew office, to say that they couldn't make their shifts. They needed a sick day, a vacation day, while other people were calling in to say, hey, can I take more overtime? And, literally the crew offices were no longer able to answer any of the calls. There was such an influx and overflow. So within days, they needed to be able to offload this so that people could get information, call in sick, request vacation, request overtime, and get immediate responses. So, all of these new imperatives, these new digital requirements because of COVID have really helped to push digital assistants, beyond the hype, basically. So if you look at where people are kind of already using digital assistants in the area of music, okay, there's a lot of recommendation engines surrounding if you chose a song, what should be the next song, ordering online, right? Amazon always says you bought these socks, so you might like these socks as well, or books is the same thing. And a lot of things with regard to travel and taxi. And like I mentioned with the example of my husband, personal assisting an appointment. And he just walked in the room and gave me a funny look. I'm sure that when you guys have heard of digital assistants, you also heard of chatbots. So basically, there's a big debate of or not a big debate, but there needs to be a clarification of what is the difference between a chatbot and a digital assistant. So basically, a chatbot is any computer program which attempts to maintain a conversation with a person. And so basically, a chatbot should be able to understand the basic natural language of the question of who is being asked the question, analyze that question, and provide a response from a preconceived, pre-built bank of responses. That versus a digital assistant, Oracle's digital assistants is essentially a platform to build more intelligent chatbots. So basically, it's based on artificial intelligence, again, using natural language, but it's beyond a simple conversation and beyond a single modular question and answer. So for a digital assistant, they essentially will be merging various topics on various questions. So if we look at them side by side, like we said, a chatbot uses artificial intelligence, but it uses a little bit more, machine learning, which basically means you provide the chatbot with 20 typical responses or typical questions to get a certain response. And therefore, when someone asks a question that is close to what you've set up in advance, the response will be replied. So for instance, if we have an airline bot and you say, what time is my flight to Toronto? They will say, what is your flight number? You'll give the flight number. They'll say, where are you leaving from? You'll say the departure destination, and they will give you the flight time, right? So essentially, it's a single purpose, it's user initiated, and it simulates a conversation with a human. For digital assistants, however, it is a little more all-encompassing. It could recommend or complete tasks beyond a simple conversation. It could be initiating conversations with the end user, like we said. It could be that Google Home will wake itself up because it sees that we are late for a meeting and will suggest for us to go drive to the office. And it uses artificial intelligence to actually give recommendations or predictions. So for here, it could be that I say, I'd like to order a pizza. The digital assistant could reply, would you like to order a mushroom pizza like you did last week? I'll say, no, actually, I'd like another type of vegetable pizza. It'll give me some options. Then the digital assistant could look and say, wait a minute, I see your bank balance is only $4. You can't really afford the pizza. And go, and that's the end of my pizza journey. But basically what it does is it provides me with recommendations and a task flow for the actual situation at hand. So people use digital assistants to provide like a very simplified user experience, to provide a next generation user experience or user interface for a common application. It is a very quick way of getting information, especially question and answer information, offloaded to an end user, a customer, or employee. Okay, so especially remote productivity, because it is a very low cost to set up. You just kind of engage with your Oracle Cloud service, and you set up the questions and answers, and away you go. So it's not like these typical projects that take years and years to get up and running. So a lot of people like conversational interfaces because they remove, like we said, the training and the friction. You could write, speak, chat, but you don't need to do any learning for how to work or run the system. And it's a nice way of being able to open up back office applications to an end user in a simple, simplified user interface with no downloads or installations or complicated manuals. Anytime we begin to create a chatbot, the most important thing that we have to really have in mind is the issue of creating what we call a conversational design. Okay, it's not enough to say, oh, I'll create a chatbot where people could call in and see if they're, give the temperature and see if they have COVID or not, right? What that would essentially be, in order to set up a chatbot, you need a use case, you need the business benefit of what you're planning to do, what's your business goal, but you also need your personal personas, right? Who are the people who are going to call this hotline? Is it going to be worried mothers? Is it going to be doctors and nurses? Is it going to be children, right? Depending on the persona is the way you're going to set out the conversation, because if it's for Doctors and nurses, you'll want to do it in a more medical format. If it's for parents, you'd want to do it in a more, you know, to alleviate worry from them. And if it's for children, you want to talk in a more childlike manner, right? The conversation itself and the conversation flow should really match the persona that you're trying to cater towards. Next, you define the user journey, right? What are the possible questions they're going to ask? Do they have to log into the system? Do they have to self-identify? What are the different types of questions and flows they could take throughout the application? And then we design a dialogue. What you're seeing here is essentially sketches from what Oracle calls a bot workshop. Oracle has been incredible at helping customers adopt this technology, and essentially letting them creating these what they call design workshops, where they sit with the end customer, they describe the journey, they design out the workflow, and they help them essentially build the final bot. So if you're at all interested in chatbots and moving forward, I highly suggest you get in touch, and we could set you up with one of those as well. Like we said on the bot personality, it's very funny. A lot of people tend to give their bots a real personality, with a name, with an avatar, with a tone. Because although it's not human, the personality could really affect how people engage with your bots. So I have a great example of this. We created a chatbot for MTA's New York City Transit, and it was a bot for people to be calling in sick. So essentially, if they would call in sick and they had 3 sick days or less, the bot would say, "Are you sure you're not feeling well enough to go into work today?" Whereas if the bot had 10 days or more, the bot would say, "Oh, feel better and have chicken soup." So of course we show a demo to the senior management, and they looked and they said, "What do you mean? Are you sure you're feeling well enough to go to work today?" They said, "This is going to encourage, union workers who are sick to go into work. And then if they do, it's basically going to cause a whole ruckus with the union and the union lawyers that the robot told me to go into work." So basically they put the bot project on hold because of the persona that was obviously a little too casual for such a serious application. So this brings us to our next critical thing, which is to test, to test, and test. Natural language is only as good as the data you train it with. The real data needs to come from the end users. We had this a lot. We did a chatbot for an Oracle user group for the Kscope conference, where we had 500 people asking questions all over the conference about everything to do with events, the happy hours, the meals, vegetarian, where the bathrooms are, all the sessions, etc. And at first we did extensive training with everybody on the board. So it just so happened that the board happened to be everybody from the East Coast. Then when they opened it up to also extend to the conference committee to test, we started having all these kind of missed, that's what we call them, missed cases. And it was because people in the South seem to ask for things a bit differently. So, it's really important to understand natural language with regard to how people not only speak and accent, but also how they ask questions and how they refer to things. So what you tend to do is you test the bot, you get the successes and the failures, and then the failures you actually plug back into the application to what we call to train the bot, to say that if you receive one of these failed answers in the future, this is actually the correct answer. So that process is even more important almost than setting up the bot, to make sure that even live at the conference, we were training the bot and feeding it failed responses. Another really important one is what we call account for the clowns. There are always going to be people whose sole job it is to try to trip up the bots, right? Whether that's saying, kiss me bot, marry me bot, you're an idiot, kill yourself, etc., etc. So make sure you have responses for these type of questions, and they're handled in your bot, because otherwise it ends up being a little bit embarrassing when your bot doesn't know how to account for the clowns. So I'm going to jump in to a little bit of a demo right now. Essentially, before we jump right in, I just wanted to show a little bit of the architecture, so you'll see what you're going to be looking at. So essentially, the bot is made up of several parts, right? The bot itself has Oracle's digital assistant cloud, and that is in charge of creating the conversation back and forth, right? What will the bot reply, and what is the bot answering? What are the questions? It is composed of skills. Okay, skills are different, topics or modular units that accounts for different use cases. Okay, every bot could be made up of several skills, and digital assistants could go through many skills in order to answer specific questions that they're getting from the different channels. So the channels themselves are what we hear on the left-hand side. A channel could be Slack, Microsoft Teams, Facebook Messenger, Google Home, Alexa, etc. And then the skills themselves could be attached to a back office data store or an application. So a very, very common one is SaaS. Oracle set up their SaaS applications to be with plugins directly into Oracle's digital assistant. So that's a very common one. With Oracle eBusiness Suite, our solution, OraPlayer, allows you to connect directly to eBusiness Suite applications using a REST service enablement product. So if you're looking to do any on-premise EBS bots, we could definitely help you there. But essentially, to create the bots, it all starts with creating the skill. So I don't know if you guys heard before, I said that my poor cloud version decided to choose today to fake his death. So I'm going to show you guys a quick video demo, but basically I'm going to create now a new skill. And of course, since it's Oracle, it always starts with the pizza skill. What you're looking at now is called the Conversation Designer. Oracle created it in order to assist people to create a bot in the most simplified manner, where if you click on the green dot, it'll be what the person is asking. And if you click on the blue dot, it'll be what the bot responds. And this way you can simulate a typical conversation while capturing the dynamic parameters that are going to be for input and for output. And then you could push a simple button to generate the back-end code. This way, even people who don't know how to fully code the bot itself will be able to design simplified chats and plug them in as they go to back office applications. So here we see that the end user would like to order a pizza. How does the bot respond? By saying, sure, what kind? So the first thing we have is that there's a kind of pizza, right? That would be an input we would need. So the end user replies, pepperoni. Next, we see that we would like a message of type list called size. So now we have a second parameter. But here we're not letting them choose whatever they want. We're choosing them only 3 sizes: small, medium, and large. So here again, the end user would choose a large pizza. And of course, you can go on with things such as, getting the money, etc. But here we're going to have the bot reply that the large pepperoni pizza is on its way. If I click try it out, it actually lets me do a bot simulation of the question. So it's kind of fun to be able to do a sort of test run without needing to, fully deploy the app. And it allows you to kind of simulate the conversation. So here again, you'd like to order a pizza. They want pepperoni, a large, and they thank me. So now I'm able to click generate, and this will generate the mock-up code and already place it in my skill. So here, once I've created the skill itself, I could then go into a tester. In the testing skill, basically, I want to be able to phrase the questions slightly differently and see that the bot is still able to answer my question because it is done with, it is close enough or has a close enough degree of confidence to what we set out in the conversation designer. So here we say, hi, I'd like to order pizza. I say pepperoni, I say large, and it's on its way. Now, if we look here on the right-hand side, we see the actual structure or the flow of the bot, right? The first variable we have is the kind of pizza, and the second variable we have is the size of pizza. So we know that those two variables are now dynamic, right? We could basically replace those during our conversation with any dynamically inputted parameter. Next, I go into the intents. Hold on, I want to go back 1 second into the intents. So very quickly. Okay, so what is an intent? An intent is essentially a list of questions. It should be at least 10 or more that should reflect the same, the question itself with regard to the domain, the topic you've chosen. So if I'm here saying that I have a bot called Order Pizza, some of my intents, some of my examples to start initiating the pizza order would be, hi, I would like to order pizza. I would order pizza. Order pizza. I would like to order. Can I order pizza, right? All of those things essentially mean the same thing, right? In the pizza bot, if I say, hey, can I order? They should automatically know that I want to create a new order. And they should automatically ask me for my kind, right? What kind of pizza? And then next, ask me for the size. So these intents are very important. It's important to create many intents and also to focus on testing the intents to make sure that when the questions are answered or asked in different forms, they still are queried alongside the bot. Here, I'm going to actually make an intent for what we call unresolved, like we mentioned, right? If somebody writes kukuriku, foo, whatever type things they want, and we want to train the bot that they also should be able to accept junk, right? As we said. Therefore, anything that is not resolved by one of the intents that we have will fall into this category of unresolved and be able to be handled in this manner. Okay, so here you saw the skills that we created. So we created a pizza skill, but of course there's many other skills that could be created. But now I wanted to show how we get from this to e-business suites, right? Why EBS is a digital assistant, because today is the EBS day. So basically, Oracle eBusiness Suite has tons of information on the back office application, not really available to the end users, right? And till now, if anyone wanted to even look slightly into eBusiness Suite, they would have to run, a Java applet, connect to the system, remember their training of where to find exactly what they're looking for, and it was very, very cumbersome. It was a big joke that some of our customers would say, we have end users who need to go into EBS once a month, and it's so complicated they can't even find what they're supposed to be doing. They need training once a month in order to, actually run one report once a month. Okay, so to be able to provide a conversational API on top of your EBS would really enhance this employee's productivity, improve the customer experience, and have people adopt EBS back offices to their front office a lot easier, right? There are what we call quick start models, or player, as well as we've worked with Fishbowl, and I'm sure others have these modules set up, right? So SaaS comes out of the box from Oracle with a bunch of starter bots that you can actually plug in to the Oracle ODA and be able to use those bots on top of your SaaS applications. And OraPlayer provides similar things for eBusiness Suite, such as iExpense, things in HR like payslip, absences, sales order, inventory management. So the same digital assistants could be used with different backends at the same time. So this really allows you to modernize your EBS experience in a very simple manner. Okay, so again, anybody that has EBS 12, even 12.1.2 is able to do this, where they can actually enable their back office system as REST services to plug in to Oracle's digital assistant and build it out. So I still have a little time. So yeah, so the first example I wanted to show is Oracle's iExpense module as a chatbot. So here, again, once COVID started hitting and people couldn't really gather all the receipts and go back to the office and start inputting receipts, they wanted a way to streamline the expenses and make it more efficient to be able to input credit card receipts and paper receipts by a chat or verbal type digital assistant. So here is our example. If we do a quick demo. I don't know if there's any questions in the meantime, but please feel free to, I think I see here like a Q&A little bubble. So if you have any questions as I go along, please feel free to pop them in the Q&A, and I'll kind of get to them as we go through. No problem. Okay, great. So we just wanted to go through the bot applications, and here we have the iExpense bot. We could show you it when it's successful or when it fails, but let's start with successful. Okay, so essentially, again, we start the conversation with the first type of question. So here, or the comment, so here we say, I would like to create a new expense report. the first thing they're going to ask me is my organization for me to choose a department code. The next, we could actually choose airfare, any of the type of expenses, right? Airfare, meals, hotels, etc., and enter the receipt date. Once we do that, we're able to pick a currency. It supports multi-currency, of course, and enter the receipt date. Here we could pick the travel type. Now, what's interesting is all of the business processes and all the business logic that's in EBS is still firing here. So if I wasn't allowed first class, it wouldn't show it in my list of values. If I wasn't allowed to travel between two cities, it would give me an error message. And it also won't let me save anything if I don't have permissions to a certain dollar amount or things like that. So here at the row item, so this is something that even the iExpense app doesn't allow, which is creating receipts at the row item. I took a photo, and now when I click submit expense report, it actually puts the expense report into eBusiness Suite. So it's 100% synchronization. I see here we have a question. The question is, what are the various modules, work areas, which you currently provide the bots for? Are these customizable for certain regions and have different accents and the way the bot is handled? So number one, yes, there are currently, there are already template bots set up for Oracle sales order, inventory item lookup, inventory warehouse lookup, HR, a lot of the HR self-service functionalities. But again, anything within EBS can be extended as a REST service and then expressed as a bot without problem. These can be different per region. You could do it when people log in. You could do it with different flavors of the bot. And it is also multilingual. And with different accents in the way the bot is handled, there are also partners, depending on how many languages, and if you want to use Google Translate or you actually need native language. There's a company called Bot Supply who actually makes multilingual Oracle bots, for all the Scandinavian languages and things of that nature. So if you want to send me in the chat your contact information, I'm happy to drill down a little further into the specifics of your question. But that's it in general. So besides iExpense Digital Assistant, another one that we've been seeing is very important, especially during COVID time, is the sales order bots. So basically what happens is people are in the field, people are in warehousing, and they're trying to gather the parts, set them up, but there's no real way of doing this without all of the warehouse people working on the desktop computers, right? All of the warehouse people are sharing kind of a common desktop, or kiosks as they call it. Now with COVID, a lot of companies want all the different warehouse employees to be able to work on their own tablet, contactless they call it, without cross-contamination, to be able to look up availability, to do sub-inventory transfers, to be able to do inventory reservations, and really be able to manage things, without getting in contact with the other people, as well as to be having people sign off on orders without, sharing a pen. They could simply do it with their finger, etc. So, sales order is another very big use case that we've seen, especially surrounding COVID. And here is an example of a bot. Okay, hold on. So basically, we call this the sales bot. So the first thing that it was doing is basically it is done for replenishment, right? Let's say you have customers that you meet in, the stores, or you look on the shelves and you want to see how many of inventory of each item is left or is no longer left, and how much they're going to cost, and kind of understanding how long it's going to take you to replenish things in the store. So the first thing is somebody would like to place an order. Hello? Did I lose everybody?
No, we're still here. We can hear you.
You can hear me? Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can hear your screen.
Oh,
You're
okay.
on salesbot.mp4.
Perfect. Because I kind of got stuck, so I just want to make sure. Great. So the first thing we do is we look at the price of AS54888, and it tells us the price is $1,600. Might be a little expensive, but you never know. Next, they ask, what is the availability? And here we actually see the manufacturing warehouse, the item availability, the on-hand quantity, and the reservable quantity. Now, all of the fields here that are in blue are actually from eBusiness Suite. Okay, the data has been queried from the bot directly from the REST service into eBusiness Suite. So it's almost as if you're doing a database query through a bot, and it's quite incredible because you really have this way of providing a safe, secure way of presenting data to external users from the EBS system, and really showcasing your EBS data in a very user-friendly, language-first type of way, right? So which warehouse has parts AS54888? Now we get a list of all the warehouses and what is their reservable quantity, right? We have Dallas, Seattle, and Boston. Next, I would like to place an order for the specific part. And now it takes me through a little bit of a menu. So I want to order a part. They ask me what part number. Now, if you look at it closely, it's going to look very similar to what we saw for the conversation designer, right? So as you kind of look through it, right, it knows that if you ask to order a part, that it has to ask you for the next variable, which is the part number, right? And then once you give it the part number, it knows that the next variable is the unit, right? So similar to the conversation designer, how it built that flow, here you could see it really go through the flow as you order the part. Next, it's actually asked from which warehouse. And which customer to ship it to. And then we see that the order has been processed. Okay. Now, when an order is processed, again, it's actually conducting an insert into Oracle eBusiness Suite under that user for that product. So it's quite incredible that you could have something that's kind of so dynamic, yet be able to update, insert, delete, and really synchronize one-to-one with your existing EBS system. What's also important to notice, today I was showing you the demos on just a plain JavaScript, but this same bot could be also connected using the different channels, right? So here's the same item warehouse and item order running through a Slack front end, right? So the same way we saw it just now through a JavaScript front end, we could just as easily see it through a Slack front end. So the big question is, like, where do we go from here, right? So on the one hand, we kind of feel like bots could be a little bit of a gimmick. But on the other hand, it's a very quick win to be able to take your back office information and really highlight it in an easy, user-friendly way to employees, customers, vendors, etc. And to do it, to really start out a project is a very simple few steps, right? The first thing we would do is kind of assess the requirements. Do we have a business case, right? Because if we don't have a business case, it's totally not worth our time to be able to go into it and build out this type of thing. What platforms do you want to deploy to? Is this going to be a bot that goes through Facebook, through Slack, on JavaScript, on your website, right? What are the user interface requirements? Do people need to upload images, or do they simply need to answer questions? Do you need it to be voice enabled? How do you need to enable your end user to interact with this bot? Next, we want to understand the existing system. Where is our information today? Is it in a SaaS system? Can we plug the SaaS skill sets into the bot? Is it in a database? Should we create, ORs or REST service based on the database elements? Or is it trapped in an EBS application where we need to literally take our e-business suite application and you hopefully use Oracle, our solution, to enable it as REST services to plug into the bots. Next, we try to do what we call a prototype or a proof of concept. So that will give us a really easy way of setting out a future timeline and budgeting. So if we pick a single use case that we think we can enable, what would be the inputs, what would be the outputs, and what would be, like we said, the intents, the questions that people would be asking in order to get the data. We could then set out to do the design workshop set out by Oracle and build out kind of a first draft of our prototype app. Then, of course, we decide on the final implementation method, right? How do we secure it? How many platforms do we set it out on? Do we need any external data or any third-party applications? And then get it ready to go, right? Essentially, like I said, Oracle is very excited to get people up and running with bots. So if you at all need any assistance, you could see my email address here at the bottom. I can connect you to someone from Oracle for the SaaS information about the bots, or if it's for EBS bots, we're here to help. And I see somebody's already sent an email. So, please feel free if you want to put your email here in the chat, and I could send you the information as well. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, that the slides will be available after the session as well, right? So you could also take a look back at the slides if you had any further questions. And that's essentially all for me. I had to skip a tiny bit to leave room for questions, but if nobody has questions, we can go back a bit, but please let me know if I had any questions. And of course, I definitely want to thank our hosts, Kristen, Giannini. Thank you guys so much for doing so much for the community. It's not easy to set up, full day of content from all these amazing experts. So I really appreciate being among them and all your efforts.
Thanks so much, Mia. Thank you. You're too kind. No, we love having you here. Seriously, it's really cool to do an Ebs Day for once.
Yeah.
We were planning this for a long time. It just somehow never made it into our program, and we tried not to overload the days. But as they say,
one question on my side.
Sure.
Did you ever had issues with security, like through a bot you can query your system and database? Isn't that extremely risky if you're overlooking a bit security to just start querying too much? Like, give me the salaries of my boss. Sure, your boss is getting X money.
Yeah, no. So the way the bot works is it works based on a REST service. So it doesn't connect directly to the database. It connects to a REST service. So a REST service basically has a list of input parameters and output parameters that it could receive. And the REST service is only enabled if you have a certain username password. So what happens is I send a username, password, employee name, and a request for salary, right? It's going to go to the database, log on with the username, password, and do a query with that username and salary. And it's going to get an error message on the database level, right? It's going to say, Mia, that's your boss. You can't get its salary, right? So you're not privileged to see the data. And it's going to return that to the bot.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So there's nothing essentially that you could query through a bot that you could directly, as long as you work with the REST services.
Yeah.
If you create a bot that does any select, but to create the bot itself, initially you have to set up a list of questions. So you'd have to first set up a list of questions that could say, what is his salary? What is Dave's salary, right? And then you'd need permissions on the database through the REST service. So it would be quite difficult to just, create a bot that just goes wild, if not impossible.
So the security is always being handled by the implicit login that happens behind any kind of REST service. So whatever that REST service is. Correct.
So the REST service essentially handles the data integrity, like and authentication, and besides that, the bot itself has a list of what we called skills, right, of topics which are valid. So if you had a bot who did not have a salary skill, if you would say, what's my boss's salary? The bot would answer, I'm sorry, I don't have that information, or I'm sorry, I haven't learned that yet, right? It would just respond that it's not even within its skill set to respond about salary. So there's even a second layer of security. The first layer of security is the skills that the bot are allowed to respond about. So it could be that someone creates a bot that tells people salaries, right? And then that's one degree closer to getting that information. But even if the bot was able to tell people its salaries, you'd still need to connect to the database using an authenticated username and password that had permissions to see certain salaries. But if the bot did not, if I had permission on the database to see people's salaries, but the bot did not have a salary skill, I still wouldn't be able to. The bot itself would reply to me, I don't know what salary is, I'm not skilled enough to answer that question, basically.
So as you said, there's a second functional layer on top of this.
Right, exactly. Okay. So there's like a database, there's like a data layer as well as a skill set layer.
Okay.
Great.
So I don't see any other question coming in. So thank you very much for the presentation.
My pleasure. And like I said, I'm happy to answer any questions in the future. And everybody has my email. I'll put my email back on for 1 more minute for the last minute here if people want to copy it down if they have any additional questions.